Hello, everybody. Once again, I am here to remind you guys that our 5-year anniversary is coming up, which is crazy to think about still.
Yeah, lots of time.
Yeah, we've been doing this for a while now, and I want to hear from you. We both want to hear from you and answer questions. If you have a question for us that you have not found a place to ask before, or if you are randomly thinking about something from a book long past or a book yet to come, or I don't know, what our favorite food is or something, just ask us, see what we're doing, what we're up to.
Yeah.
We want to answer some of those questions during a bonus episode that we will be releasing during our 5-year anniversary week. I don't know exactly when that's going to release yet. It's not going to be the same day as our normal episodes, so you're going to get 2 episodes in a week. We'll find a time. I'll find a time when I am done editing it and we get all of our questions in.
Yeah.
So please email us at isfitzhappy@gmail.com, or you can go to our website, isfitzhappy.podbean.com, and there's a tab at the top called, I think, pages and then more links, and you can find all of our social medias there. We're at Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, YouTube, and Reddit. Let us know that you are asking a question for our 5-year anniversary episode, because I want to separate those out from the end of episode questions and discussions about the chapter.
Definitely.
Yeah, so please let us know what you got going on. We want to hear from you guys.
Yeah, we always love hearing from you.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
We're discussing chapter 31 this week, Bargaining Chips. It's right after Convergence, where everyone kind of gets together, and now they are on Vivacia. And we start with Malta. So Malta is stepping free of Wintrow's embrace and Althea's embrace, because they were very surprised at the end of last episode that she
Right.
was there. And at the very end of last episode, Vivacia greeted her as dragon friend, but nobody knows that Vivacia is addressing Malta directly with that. No one except for Malta, it seems.
Right. And also, just as a little preface, we ended last chapter, it was Malta fearing her father was now dead. That's what Wintrow wasn't telling her when she asked, "Where's Dad?" And he said he's not here.
Yeah, exactly. He's gone.
Yeah, he's gone. And so we know as readers, rereader or not, that Kyle has been taken away to a safe place and is now currently with Brashen. But as far as
Malta and Wintrow.
yeah, Wintrow at least is aware. Kennit has put him away on a secret island. So he's not trying to be vague, but it's just a classic, I think what Luke said last time, the classic miscommunication where now Malta is certain her father is dead.
Yep. And she doesn't even want to ask any more questions about it.
Right. So she is reeling from that thought and comes into this thinking about how no one is there to save her. She has to do it herself now because her dad is gone and her aunt and brother are on this ship for some reason, and so she's kind of on her own is how she feels.
Yeah, so she's kind of gazing around and sees that when Vivacia said, "Well met, dragon friend," no one thinks it's her, and everyone's gaze keeps kind of flitting to the Satraps because the Satrap just got on deck as well. So
Right.
they think the ship is talking to the Satrap, and she is looking around still at the crowd and then sees somebody beside the Satrap. A tall, dark man with one peg leg. His handsome, self-possessed face showed displeasure. Beside him, the confident look was fading from Captain Red's face. He hated being upstaged. Captain Red glanced at the tall man, and Malta suddenly knew who he was. Captain Kennit, the king of the Pirate Isles. She took advantage of the distraction to appraise him. Her reaction was immediately both attraction and distrust. Like Rode Cairn of Bingtown, he radiated danger. Once she would have found him mysterious and alluring, she had grown wiser. Dangerous men were neither romantic nor exotic. They were men who could hurt you. This man would not be as easy to manipulate and convince as Captain Red had been. And so Vivacia, during all of this, with that pause, kind of speaks up and says, "Are you too shy to speak to me?" And Malta is trying, like, without verbally making any noise, trying to be like, "No, don't pay attention to me."
Yeah, she's
Not me.
basically without doing this, but basically is waving her arm or waving her hand at her neck, going, "Cut it out, cut it out."
Because she only has to be viewed as the advisor to the satrap, right? She can't be viewed as more important, because otherwise that kind of separates them, their
Right.
team going into this.
Yeah, and not only that, but it also puts more, I don't know, it could potentially put less weight on the satrap, and she's made this deal to get him free, I think, as well. So making him seem less important than her, it like might damage his ability to be set free in this
Right.
negotiation. So I think it is just sort of, you don't want to disrupt any of the plans she's already laid, and she's not really sure how to handle it.
So Vivacia seems to have a flicker of understanding at Malta's dilemma there, and when the satrap speaks up, Vivacia doesn't press the point. So Satrap, believing that he's been spoken to, says, "Greetings, Liveship." His brief moment of wonder at her had passed. So Malta thinks like, well, I guess if you're presented with every wonder of the world,
Yeah.
nothing remains, amazing for long.
True.
His gratitude was likewise short-lived. At least he seemed to recall her counsel. Do not behave as a captive nor as a supplicant. So he turns to Kennit and greets him as Captain Kennit, still not recognizing him as king or anything like that, because that's one of their negotiation points.
Right.
And Kennit regards him back with cool amusement, basically acknowledges him as if they were on equal footing already. So the satrap, of course, doesn't appreciate that. And then he directs them, this way, and sends Wintro forward. "Wintro, come." To Malta, it seemed that he spoke as if her brother were a dog or a servant. "Malta," the satrap's chill voice sternly reminded her of her duties. I found that kind of comparison directly to the two is very similar, even
Yes.
if she doesn't think of herself in that way.
She's not the satrap's dog.
Yeah,
But
Wintro seems like Kennet's dog.
right.
She had a facade to maintain. She could not be Wintro's sister, nor Althea's niece right now. She kept her voice low. "Ask me nothing now. We must talk later. Please, trust me. Don't interfere with what I do." She stepped away and they let her go, but Althea's eyes were flinty. Wintro hurried to his captain's command. Althea.
Well, I feel as though this is typical Malta with the air of dramatics. Don't ask me just now. I have
Right.
something to do. We must speak later. It feels like something in a drama play, of
Right, yeah.
Malta has a flair of dramatics. And we know that she's matured a lot and she's gone through so much. Althea does not know that. Althea doesn't know anything but the girl who was about to debut in the Rain Wilds when she left, Or not the Rain Wilds, sorry. The
concourse, Big Time concourse.
the big ball.
Yep.
So Althea's not aware of any of the fighting that's happened against Chalced and all of the things that happened after the ball. So of course, I'm sure to Althea, this is just Malta up to her usual antics.
Right. Malta was getting a little bit better, and Althea had
True.
acknowledged that when they
True.
were together, that they seemed to be finding an equal footing, if not, even if they weren't getting close.
Yeah, like some sort of respect.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's definitely interesting to see. And I wonder too, does Althea know Vivacia meant Malta?
No, because Althea asks right here.
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
Yeah. So we're in Althea's point of view now, and she's kind of asking out loud, like, how does Malta get over here? Like, what happened? And Jack's like, I don't know. She's your family.
Yeah.
And then Althea turns to Vivacia and says, "Why did you greet him as dragon friend? The satrap is a friend to dragons?" "Not the satrap," the ship replied evasively. "I would as soon not speak of it just now." What? Why is that evasive, Althea? There's two people that stepped aboard, and one of them...
Right. Well,
I don't know.
I mean, to be fair, she's asking the ship a question and the ship is refusing to give her an answer. And I think with their bond before, she would have known, first of all, and she would have gotten an answer. And so I'm sure it's more just her being upset because the ship isn't as attuned to her.
Sure. I just think Althea's being a little bit obtuse here.
Yeah. Well, she kind of has to be.
It's kind of a 50-50, you know?
True.
Anyways, Vivacia says, I am troubled by other things because I don't want to speak about this right now. And then Althea, gets into that, and it's about her serpents. Their need to be guided back to their spawning river and escorted up it. It is hard for me still to think of you as a dragon, Althea continues. And harder still for her to accept that Vivacia had a loyalty that superseded all others. But if the serpents were first in her heart, before the Vestrits, perhaps they preceded Kennit as well. Childishly, Althea perceived a possible wedge. Why do you not simply demand it of Kennit? Do you know anyone who reacts well to a demand? You fear he would refuse you. Vivacia was silent, and that quiet jolted Althea from the rut of her own concerns. It was like being lifted high on a wave and suddenly seeing to a farther horizon. She perceived Vivacia's confinement, spirit of a dragon encased in a body of wood, dependent on the men who set her sails and the winds that pushed her canvas. There were, she suddenly saw, many ways to be raped. The revelation broke her heart, yet her next words sounded childish in her ears. Were you mine again, we would leave today, this minute. You mean those words. I thank you for them. Jack then is like, well, you could open up your seams. And Vivacia's like, well, I'm not mad like Paragon.
Yeah, I'm not Paragon, so I'm not doing that. But I think this whole talk of Vivacia being, she has to follow the will of the people aboard her. She doesn't have her own free will, which is something I think Wintro has realized about Vivacia. It helped him grow closer to her because he was a slave.
Her body is not her own.
Yeah, so his brush with slavery made him feel as though Vivacia also is in a similar position where she's also a slave, and Vivacia had felt that as well. I think they had a deep conversation about that. And then here with Althea, who had this tragedy happen to her as well, then she can also put that sort of on Vivacia and be like, wow, okay, so even if you are this beautiful magical ship, your body isn't your own. You are still dependent on other people to do what you need. I don't know. I think it's really interesting to have that. And it is sort of a theme for a lot of our characters, right? They're all sort of dependent on their plans only working if others act the way they need them to.
Right. And
so, yeah, it's interesting to...
It's a literary device as well that Robin Hobb uses because it's extremely hard to put ourselves in Vivacia's shoes without those comparisons, right?
Right.
And I think it is somewhat successful in that on a deep read, you can definitely see that. If you're critically thinking about the text, you can see how awful it is to be a dragon trapped in wood.
Right.
But it's only somewhat successful because, like, if you're just reading through it, you don't quite get the depth of feeling of these short comparisons.
Right.
At least my read-throughs didn't. I'm still with Wintro when he's, feeling awful about being enslaved because it's more a human response, right? I'm with Althea when she's feeling violated and stuff. And these small little comparisons to Vivacia, are like touchstones. But if you're just quickly reading through the book, you don't really relate to it because it's an alien creature, right?
Yeah,
so it's very hard. So I get why Robin Hobb put him in, and it does make sense critically thinking about it. It's just extremely hard to do, and I think she did the best she could.
Yeah. I think it is. There's also the added sort of, it would be awful if you were a ship, like consciousness trapped in a ship, because you can never leave the water and you can never sail on your own. You always have to have somebody on board, and it would be really lonely. So I get that aspect of it, but on the other hand, I feel like when it was just Vivacia and we didn't know that the ship was sort of also a dragon, that would mean that Vivacia doesn't really have I guess she has concepts of living on land because of the memories she's absorbed, but she as a being doesn't understand that concept and has been built to do this thing.
Right.
Like that's what she wants to do. It seems like the other live ships enjoy being a boat. And so it's sort of, I mean, not that every boat has to enjoy it, but like, I don't know, it sort of feels like, well, that's what you were made to do. It's not like humans where we aren't made to do one specific thing.
Right.
I don't know. It is a little bit harder unless you think about it in tandem with the characters around her and what they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, yeah, it would be awful. But again, I think the dragon aspect makes that more sympathetic because she was supposed to be a dragon. She was supposed to fly and be free and be her own master and isn't. I think personally for me, reading it as just a live ship, I feel less sympathy because what else is a live ship besides a ship?
Yeah,
and they don't know. I don't know.
I think that's probably helped by Tintaglia being free and having a couple points of view in Tintaglia's eyes. While Ship of Magic Vivacia is just a live ship, right? We don't have that reference point of a dragon, of what they're supposed to be. It's just
how they act
ship,
or think.
You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, Vivacia here is like, yeah, I'm not mad like Paragon. I can't just threaten the lives of everybody to get my way. I have to bargain with Kennit. He's not going to be swayed by threats or demands, but I have nothing to give. And Althea takes that kind of as a challenge and looks at it as a Bingtown trader, saying, first, what do you want of him? Second, what can we offer him? What do I want? And Vivacia just kind of relates it, I want him to sail up the Rainwild River, guarding everything, stay there for a while.
And not just Kennit, a whole fleet of Kennit's ships to go guide these serpents to the Rainwilds, and then also to guard the Rainwild mouth and the cocoons so that everybody is safe while they're cocooning.
But she does finish that up saying, every bit of that runs counter to Kennit's best interests. Althea felt stupid for not seeing it earlier. If he helps the serpents, he loses the use of them. They disappear to become dragons. He loses a powerful tool against Jamalia. Bolt Self was too eager to flaunt her strength to him. She did not foresee this. Vivacia shook her head. As for your second question, I have nothing to offer him that he does not already possess. So then Jack's like, well, the dragons could come back. And Vivacia's like, I'm not going to subject other people to slavery.
Yeah, I'm not going to shackle them to a promise. Not that I could, even if I wanted to.
Right.
But I don't want to, and I'm not doing that to my kind.
And Jack makes a joke here. It's useless. There is nothing he wants that he doesn't already have. She smiled mirthlessly. Save Althea.
Yeah.
Not a great joke, Jack.
No.
Even if you don't believe Althea believes Althea, so why would you make that joke to her?
Right. And on top of that, she just lost Brashen.
Yeah. No, Jack isn't a nice person.
Sometimes, yeah. I think... Okay, so this is like really interesting to think about, but it does bring home the point that Six Duchies people are barbarians or whatever, when Jack is a little more crass and a little less refined
than
her counterpoints.
Like that military humor.
Yeah. And
gallows humor.
I find that so interesting because whenever we are reading from Fitz's point of view and we're in the Six Duchies with Fitz and the people who live there, they don't seem unrefined. And I'm not saying that like that's maybe even like a conscious decision. Maybe it was on Robin Hobb's part, but like I think it's really interesting that it could just be cultural differences.
Could be, yeah.
That's just how Jack rolls. And maybe it is just a Jack thing. Maybe it's not every person. Obviously the courtiers wouldn't act like that in Six Duchies, but maybe that is how the everyday woman would act. Maybe Molly would probably act like that, Maybe. I don't know. Hard to tell. But Jack is like a soldier, so
yeah.
I don't know. It's just interesting to think about the cultural differences there and how maybe this is just one of those things that
could be
culturally bad.
We jump over to Kennit's point of view, and he's annoyed that Etta is missing. One of the only times she would have been useful, and she's gone.
Right.
Now he has to direct Wintro around to set up his room for a meeting.
Which also, like, is Etta's always useful to him, I feel. I feel that she makes herself useful to him and is always on top of what he needs before he asks it. She's really good at reading a room and a
Yeah.
situation. And so I think that him pretending like she's never useful and now in this moment when she's not there to have everything ready ahead of time is like, ugh, the one bad thing. Like, he obviously does care about her and does need her a lot more than he realizes.
Sorkor volunteers to help Wintrow set up, and Kennet's like, well, just as well. He's kind of always boasted about what he would do if he got his hands on the Satrap, because obviously he and a lot of his crew blame the Satrap for the slave trade
Yeah.
and everything that's been going on there. So he's like, yeah, best not give him too much opportunity to be with the Satrap.
Also, can I just say, how long did they have until the Satrap came over? Why was this not done ahead of time?
I have no idea.
That's all I'm thinking about is
Right.
like, why didn't you pre-prepare? You knew that the Satrap was coming, even if you didn't know Malta was coming.
The timing of this is odd because Kennet's like, okay, let's go to the room. And then he sends Wintrow and Sorkor ahead of them. How long do they take to walk to that room? Like,
Right. I don't know. It's just odd.
Mhm. Kennit followed them at a leisurely pace to give Wintrow and Sorkor time to prepare the room. He saw the young woman eyeing his stump and peg. Malta Vestrit resembled her father. Kyle Haven's arrogance was in her carefully held mouth and narrowed eyes. He halted suddenly and flourished his stump at her. A serpent bit it off, he informed her casually, a hazard of life upon the seas. The satrap recoiled, looking more distressed than his young companion did. Kennit kept his smile small. Ah, he had forgotten the noble Jamalian distaste for physical disfigurement. Could he use that? Captain Red had outlined the details of the satrap's proposal, a dazzling offer, Kennit reflected gleefully, and only the first offer. He leads him into the room, and it is cleaned up quite nicely.
I think it's so interesting that not only do Jamalian nobles have a problem with people being different, but so too do the Six Duchies nobles.
Well, Regal and Desire.
Yeah. So inner circle. Where were they from again?
Inner duchies.
Yeah.
Maybe all of them, but it could have just been that family specifically.
True. That's a good point. I don't know.
But
I guess theirs was more about differences in general, not like disfigurement.
Right.
I don't know. Interesting. But it is interesting to see that parallel in different nobility across the world.
Yeah. And we know the fool was with the old satrap for a while too, and didn't seem to be mistreated there and was, given help. So obviously it's just kind of Cosgo.
Yeah.
It almost seems like a repeated trait for people who are pampered rulers, or sheltered rulers who are arrogant for her. Like Regal and Cosgo both have this.
Well, but Kennit specifically says he forgot the Jamalian noble way.
Yeah. I know.
So that must be a normal thing. Because although how many nobles does he come in contact with? How is that a thing people just know about nobles? I
have no idea. Yeah. The noble Jamalian distaste. Yeah, no idea. But Kennit is pleased with how the room is set up. It's a extravagant showing of wealth, but not over the top. It's not ostentatious or anything. Right. It just shows that it's well cared for and neat. So he's pleased. Wintrow, do the honors with a drink. There's a good fellow. Malta stares around the room, and Kennit could not resist, saying, no doubt the chamber has changed since last you saw it, companion, but pleased, be at ease, as if your father still occupied it. That provoked an unforeseen response. Malta Vestrit is not my companion. You may address her as advisor, the satrap informed him haughtily. But even more interesting was how pale Malta went. She fought a look of anguish from her face. Weakness was made to be exploited. Captain Red had warned him she was a wily negotiator. A bit of rattling might take the edge off her wits. And so he pokes a little bit more at the Captain Haven, the Kyle situation there, saying, well, it's a pity he became involved in the slave trade. If he had not made that choice, this ship might still be his. I am sure you are aware of my promise to my people. I will rid the pirate isles of slavers. Taking Vivacia was one of my first steps. We are here to negotiate my restoration to the Gemelian city, the satrap observed tightly. He had already seated himself. The others had chosen seats but remained standing, waiting for Kennit. This assumption of protocol did not escape the pirate. Of course we are. Wintro, please be comfortable. Like, gestures to everybody. So Wintro holds out his chair and everyone else sits down. So Kennit is trying to throw Malta off by mentioning her father multiple times, and the Satrap kind of interrupts, like, hey, let's just get going on with this. Stop talking about that. And Kennit brings it up once again.
Right. Well, of course he's going to. He, first of all, is enjoying this whole situation immensely.
Yeah.
But second of all, he's trying to get under their skin any way he can. And so he finally, I think at first didn't quite know why she was reacting the way she was, and then hits the nail on the head with his third instance of bringing up Kyle by saying, it's a pity he couldn't be here, but maybe we can negotiate his safe return too.
Yeah.
Letting her know that Kyle Haven is alive and kind of shocking her.
Yeah, exactly. The satrap's boyish face flushed with rage. That had divided them. Malta had instantly suppressed it, but hope had flared bright in her eyes. She now had an interest in pleasing Kennit rather than protecting the satrap. So Malta makes a good show of it, saying like, oh, that's most kind of you, but I'm negotiating on behalf of the satrap.
Yeah, my interests are not those of my family today. She tried to make eye contact with the satrap, but he stared stonily at Kennit. I am here as the satrap's most loyal subject, she finished.
Kennit hears her doubts, and he is ready to begin. He thinks he has adequately thrown a wrench in between the two of them as a team, and he's ready to make a deal.
Right. Which, to be fair, not that close-knit of a team to begin with. So.
Right, exactly. Not that hard.
Yeah, and I don't really think that this is the straw that breaks the camel's back. I know later they have trouble, but I don't think it's anything to do with Satrap no longer trusting that Malta has his interests in heart. I think it's him being annoyed that it goes on so long. So Kennit may feel as though he has won some secret battle, but I don't really think he did much with this. But he has no way of knowing that because he doesn't know the satrap.
Right. Any little thing, though, maybe.
True.
We skip over to Brashen's point of view. There's lots of point of view hopping in this chapter and last chapter. And he is thinking of Althea, of course. They're on their way to meet up with everybody there. But he's fearing for Althea right now. All had gone well the last few days, he reminded himself. The crew's morale had vastly improved with all the fresh food and water and the day ashore. So why couldn't this go well, as well?
Right.
But still, it's Brashen. He has to be afraid of every little thing going wrong here. And most encouraging to Brashen of the last few days was that Clef had assured him that the men were putting their hearts into recovering Althea. Some felt loyalty to her, others yearned to regain pride lost at the drubbing they had received from the pirate. So there seems to be a backing of their mission this time.
Yeah, and on top of that, it seems like Mother is part of this boost to morale. So not only did they get fresh food and everything, which is always a help to have your belly full of good food, but then Mother is also so kind, and she sings, or she gabbles at them, but sort of like sings songs at them and encourages them at their work. And I think it just overall has a good effect.
And most importantly, can turn hardtack into a doughy pudding, and it's not just hardtack. You know?
And everybody loves it. It tastes so good.
So sleep is kind of fleeing his mind. There's a deep, recurrent sound penetrating Brashen's mind. So he goes up on deck and he realizes that people are singing, and Paragon is singing. So he hurries out and he encounters Samoy, who I believe is one of the crew that took over as a mate in the absence of the other two mates.
Right.
And the death of the third.
Yeah, woof.
So Samoy says, "Too fine a wind to waste, sir. I think we could see Divvy Town before noon tomorrow if we can keep our canvas full. We'll get our Althea back, sir. You'll see." Brashen nodded and smiled uncertainly. When he reached the foredeck, he found Amber and Mother. Someone had secured Paragon's long dark hair in a warrior's tail. What goes on here? Paragon turned his head, mouth wide as he held the final note of the shanty, and then cut it off abruptly. Good afternoon, Captain Trell. Amber laughed aloud. I'm not sure, but no one can resist his mood today. I don't know whether it's because Mother finished reading his logs to him, or simply that he is decided, Paragon declared abruptly. I've reached a decision, Brashen, for myself, as I never have before. I've decided to put my heart into what we do, not for you, but for myself. I now believe that we can prevail. So does Mother. She is sure that, between the two of us, we can make Kennit see reason. The old woman smiled gently. In a strange contradiction, she seemed both frailer and more vital than she had. She nodded, approving Paragon's recital. The logbooks were a part of it, Brashen, but not the largest piece. The largest piece is me. It has done me good to look back and see my voyages through my captain's eyes, the places I've been, Brashen, and the things I've seen just in my life as a ship. They're all mine. His eyes were still closed, but he seemed to stare far over the waters. In a lowered voice, he went on. The pain was just a part of all that. I had lives before this one, and they are just as much mine as this. I can take all of my pasts, keep them, and determine my own future. I don't have to be what anyone made me, Brashen. I can be Paragon. Brashen lifted his hands from the railing and thinks, did the others hear the desperation behind the ship's hopeful words? If Paragon failed at this last grasp for wholeness, he suspected the ship would spiral down into madness. I know you can, Brashen told the ship warmly. A black corner of his soul felt sour and old at his lie. He dared not trust the ship's sudden elation. It seemed a mirrored distortion of his formerly bleak moods. Could not it vanish just as swiftly and arbitrarily? So, Paragon has had all of his logs read to him.
Yes.
He's remembering all of his past adventures, all of his past life, as well as the dragon memories and his past lives, and kind of completely absorbed them all.
Yeah.
And gathered them all in and decided, well, I can be all of this.
Right.
And myself.
Yeah, it's a pretty big moment for Paragon and a big acceptance happening that he's been struggling with, I think, for a long time. And so it's nice to see him feel at ease about the acceptance of all of his memories. I don't know. It's really, I don't know how to feel about it. It does feel kind of sudden, but it has been working towards that, as we've seen on his point of view.
It's been working towards that, and it's also been a few days.
Yes.
And maybe a week or so since they've been sailing and Mother's been on board, like another touchstone of his family, right?
Right.
I think that helps. But I believe Brashen here that it is a last grasp for wholeness, for hopefulness. Yeah, Brashen is a little bit cynical right now, but also he's very in tune with Paragon. They do have a deep connection.
Yeah.
Maybe not as deep as family, but a deep connection. And Brashen, I think, can definitely sense that it is a sudden change, and he isn't fully whole, but this is optimism, right? This is I believe that there is a chance to be whole.
Yes.
It's not the totally 100% positive
I am
face.
full now. I'm one being. It's sort of like, I'm going to be there. I'm going to get there.
Yes. So I think Brashen's, cynical thoughts of like, if this doesn't happen, we're all lost.
Yeah.
Could be definitely true. But in that case, it doesn't seem like such a drastic change to Brashen or to Paragon being 100% whole now. There is still that kind of doubt, but it's not lingered on for the rest of the book either, right? So it just kind of goes from this insight, I think, to eventually him being whole with Kennit.
Right. I think it's really interesting because I do sort of think Brashen is being too cynical here. I understand why. He almost just died like 2 weeks ago because of Paragon. So I understand where it's coming from. However, I do feel as though there's sort of this little like he's cynical, so he's putting that on Paragon, and like he probably feels a similar way. I think he's projecting a little bit.
Yeah.
If this doesn't work to find Althea, he's done. He's gone.
Mean, we've talked about that before, how Brashen in the book said, like, we could redeem ourselves.
Yes.
In Bingtown's eyes.
Yeah. So I think it is a little bit of projection. I think it's also a little bit of sort of looking into a change that is big.
Yeah.
But I do want to say I feel like Paragon is sort of accepting his fate here.
I think it's somewhere in between Brashen's and Paragon's outward appearance.
Yes, I agree that it's a lot too soon, but I think it's more just the step in the right direction. Like he knows now that he can be himself and it doesn't matter that he has all these memories. It's more like it's not as easy as what he's saying, but he wants it to be, and don't we all? But yeah, I don't know.
So as that happens, Clef speaks up and says, sail. And then he says, sails. Lots of them. Jamaean ships. That makes no sense, Brashen observes. You want me to go aloft and take a look, Amber offered. I'll do it myself. So Brashen goes up because he wants some time alone, and he hasn't been up since the repairs. So he just wants to see how everything's going, as well as just double check what's going on. He was soon distracted from the repaired rigging, because Clef was right. The distant ships were Jamalian. The hodgepodge fleet flew not only the colors of Jamalia, but the flags of the satrapy as well. Ballista and other siege machines cluttered the decks of several larger ships. This was no merchant fleet. The same wind that was speeding Paragon north toward Divvytown drove them. Brashen doubted that they were heading for the pirate town, but all the same, he had no desire to attract their attention. So he directs them to slow down, but gradually, as if their fleet was faster than his ship. He doesn't want them to pay attention to Paragon much.
Yeah, and then this is when Amber brings up the rumors that Althea heard in Divvytown. She thought it was just wild tales, something about the Bingtown traders offending or injuring the satrap, and Jamalia sending out a fleet to punish the town. Like as not, the satrap has finally tired of both the real pirates and the pirates that masquerade as Chalcedean patrol vessels. Then they may be our allies against Kennit, Amber speculated. Brashen shook his head and gave a rough laugh. They'll be after plunder and slaves as much as clearing the channels of pirates. So there is a thought that here's the news that we all know as readers because we saw the message that Road Karen had.
Right, but until this point, it was all just rumors, right?
Yes.
Of just like, oh, they're going to send a fleet. Oh, there is rumors of a fleet.
Right.
Now we actually see it.
And it's been so long that it was hard to tell if a fleet actually was coming.
Right.
But
because we also had a message from Sincure Falden sent to Kennit about Brashen and Althea and Divvytown, but it also included this news.
Yes. So it is not necessarily surprising, but it is sort of big news. I'm really confused. So the ships are coming from Jamalia and going towards Divvytown.
Yes.
So
Key Island, I think, was south of Divvytown, and Bingtown is north, right? So Brashen and Althea sailed from Bingtown down to Divvytown, and then were like almost sank and sailed further away, opposite, like away from Bingtown further
towards Jamalia. Okay.
To Key Island, and then we're coming back and are behind the Jamalian fleet now.
Okay. Yeah, no, because I'm so confused. What is going on? But then also, like, why is it taking the Jamalian fleet so long? What has kept them? Politics.
They sail a lot slower than live ships.
Fair. Yeah, I guess merchant ships are probably built for speed. But then you'd think that, like, siege vessels would also be built for speed.
Sure, but they have to go as fast as the slowest one.
Fair enough.
And there's nobles on board them, so they probably brought their pleasure cruisers as well.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, so we switch points of view once again, and I believe, we're in Wintrow's point of view here as he's observing the negotiations. Kennit is calling for more candles very merrily, and everyone is tired. Even Captain Red and Sorkor had begun to show signs of weariness. Only Kennit still possessed his frenzied energy. And now we've skipped ahead of some time, and Wintrow reflects over the past negotiations of how everyone held up and how he says he's extremely proud of how Malta is acting and how she has done so far. She had presented her proposal in careful phrases and at every point had enumerated the advantages it would bring to both Kennit and the satrap. Recognition of Kennit as king of the Pirate Isles, a sovereign state. An end to Jamalian slave raiders in the Pirate Isles. No more Chalcidian patrol boats in the Pirate Isles. Captain Red and Sorkor had grinned with triumph. They had been more subdued as she went on to list what the satrap wanted in exchange. The satrap's safe return to Jamalia City, escorted by Kennit's fleet, with the assurance that the Pirate Isles recognized and supported him as the satrap of Jamalia. In the future, Kennit would pledge safe passage for Jamalian-flagged ships through the Inside Passage and would himself subdue any independent pirates who ignored the agreement. At first, Kennit had waxed enthusiastic. He had sent Wintrow for parchment, pen, and ink and instructed him to write it up. That had been straightforward, save for the matter of the proper forms for referring to the satrap. So Wintrow says it nearly takes up half a page for the satrap, and then
Kennit has to do one better.
Exactly. So he went on and on with his creativity. The daring and undefeated pirate Captain Kennit, king of the Pirate Isles by virtue of his boldness and cunning. Wintrow had seen the dancing merriment in Captain Red's eyes, as well as the profound pride in Sorkor's as he transcribed these illustrious titles. He had thought that would bring a swift end to negotiations, but Kennit had only begun. So the first overtures that they had brought were like, yeah, of course we're going to do that. That's a great agreement. But also, we got more.
Yeah, we have more needs. Yeah. So Kennet's really playing this up. He's having a great time. He's clearly really enjoying this whole situation.
Oh, right.
And everyone else is sort of sick of it at this point. At the beginning, sure, the pirates were also sort of on his side, but at this point they're like, all right, bud, we got to go to bed.
Well, even through the next section here, I think they're okay with it, right? And then eventually it gets through the specifics of like offering, pardons to everybody.
Right.
Offering all these things. Like all of the pirates are like, ha ha ha, yeah, that's right. Pardon all these slaves, like free everyone from the slavery. And the satrap's like, what do you mean? There's no way to know who has these pardons and who doesn't. And then Kennit's like, whoa, why don't we just mark everybody and give them a tattoo so they know that they're free? Everyone who's in Jamalia City. And all of the pirates are like, ha 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 ha, see? Tattooing people is wrong.
Yeah, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff like that are added on. And yeah, it's stuff that Kennit wants and that really kind of drives his constituents and what they want too.
Right. And I mean, to be fair, like another addition he says is that if he's going to be patrolling the waters for these pirates who don't listen or Chalcidians, then he should get paid what Chalcid was being paid.
Right. Just transfer over the contract from Chalcid to me.
The exact amount. Let's not even negotiate otherwise.
Yeah. So they're continuing to negotiate. And at some of these demands, the satrap eventually gets up and stalked to the door and out of it. Malta had followed him miserably. Her humiliated stare betrayed that she realized what the satrap did not. There was no place for him to go. This negotiation was to become little more than a documented robbery. While they waited out the temper tantrum, Kennit ordered Wintrow to pour the finest spirits for his lieutenants and sent him to fetch samples of the cheeses and exotic preserved fruits he had captured on his most recent foray. They were relaxed and warm and comfortable when the satrap returned, followed by a defeated Malta. They resumed their seats, and in a chill voice the satrap offered Kennit 100 signed pardons that he could distribute as he saw fit. 1,000, Kennit countered, and you would give me the authorization to issue others as needed. Done, the satrap snaps as Malta is about to answer, and then this is where the satrap is bored by it. He's like, he's done. He says, "It costs me nothing. Why should I not give it to him?" And that set the tone for all that followed. So Malta is trying her best to give ground grudgingly while the satrap just wants it over with. Because he knows it's just...
He's bored. He doesn't want to do it, and it doesn't cost him anything. Yeah, just give it away. Who cares? So
basically, Wintrow is observing this and he's like, well, now it just comes down to Kennit's creativity. And this is where everyone starts to get tired.
Yeah, they're like,
okay,
all right, Kennit.
We had our fun. Like,
Wrap it up.
We're getting everything that we need, because it's devolving basically into, after they do, a lot of good things for slaves and things like that. Like Sorkor adds in that persons condemned to be sold on the block for debt would be offered the option of exile to the Pirate Isles. Captain Red protects some of the actors from the debt of the troop.
Yeah, so if the person who owns the troop owes a debt, their actors are not able
which is
to.
What happened to him and his crew.
Yes, exactly.
And then from there, all of those political things kind of dwindle away, and it just becomes privilege and comfort, basically. Right. Kennit wants to be addressed by this specific title. He wants a suite of rooms, always available for him in Jamalia City. It's all of these things. Any serpent will pass unmolested, which is an important one.
Right.
Because that actually, with his arrogance, he saves some of the future dragons.
Yeah, exactly. So, hey, good on him, I guess.
So eventually, these talks go through all night. It's the next day now. And it is just so boring to everybody else.
Yes. And Wintrow's noting that as he's fetching these candles and putting them up, he almost doesn't need them because it's now early morning.
Yeah.
But he's putting them anyway. And he's standing by Malta as he's doing this. And he just wants to tell her he's so proud of her.
Yeah, because she bargained like a true trader, he thinks.
And that Kennit's being awful, but he still can see how hard she's working and that she's doing such a good job. But he obviously can't give her that in front of Kennit. So he just has to think it really hard towards Malta while standing next to her.
We also get confirmation here from Wintrow that the offer to free Kyle did not bother her at all, really. Well, it bothered her, obviously, but it didn't show in the negotiations because he says, if Kennit's offer of restoring their father had weighed on her mind, she had refused to show it. So he's now questioning, after the end of this negotiation, what happens to her? Does she go with the satrap?
Yeah.
Do I get to know what happened to my sister? Like, what's going on?
Also, how did you even become in the company of the satrap? What is happening? He's just really wondering what led to this.
His hunger for news from home was more powerful than his need for food and sleep. He lit the last candle and resumed his seat. Kennit surprised him by clapping him genially on the shoulder. Tired, son? Well, we are nearly at the end of this. All that remains to negotiate now is the actual ransom itself. Some prefer coins, but I am more lenient in these matters. Precious gems, pearls, furs, tapestries, even this is outrageous! Despite his weariness, the satrap lurched to his feet. His mouth had gotten white and pinched. Wintrow's fearing that he might even burst into angry tears. Malta reached a supportive hand toward him, but stopped short of touching him. When she spoke, her voice was calm. Lord Magnedon Satrap, I see the logic of this. Your nobles will value you less if they have not had to pay anything to recover you. Consider this. It will give you a way to gauge who is truly loyal to you. You will reward those who are willing to contribute to your recovery later. Those who are not will feel your magnificent wrath. King Kennit is, after all, my lord, still a pirate. All your nobles would distrust a treaty in which he did not demand some sort of reward for himself, rather than merely benefits for his people. It was pathetic. She saw that the satrap was powerless to refuse Kennit. She sought to save the boy's pride for him. The satrap's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. He shot Malta a venomous look. Then, in a quiet voice, he hissed, Certainly this is so. It has nothing to do with you groveling to regain your father, does it? How much? He snapped bitterly at Kennit. And then, sails.
Right. So, unfortunately, it seems Kennit's barb at the very beginning of the negotiations did strike a chord with Satrap.
Yeah.
I don't think he's been obtuse in giving away things this whole time because Kennit pointed out that he has her
Right,
father.
no.
I think that's just Satrap. But now in this moment, it is definitely rubbing him the wrong way. But also, it's frustrating because Malta is sort of being mean to Kennit. He's just too dumb to realize, it feels.
I think it's more of like, why don't you ever take my side?
Yeah,
You know?
okay, fair. But also, how is she supposed to do that?
Right, exactly.
So, I don't know. It just...
Yeah.
But it is really funny to me that Malta is like, even after all these hours and hours of negotiation where she's had to sit through not being able to do her best because the Satrap's undermining it, and she gets a bargain at Kennit anyway. Love that. I love that she's shaving him like, yeah, a pirate wouldn't be able to just do good for others. He would need a ransom.
Right.
And it just is so funny to me because it probably did a little bit hurt Kennit's pride to be just a pirate. So good on Malta. Love that for her.
So Jola bursts in, kind of is annoyed, of course, because it's his negotiations, but it's the Jamalian fleet. And Jola's like, we can flee still, we can escape them. And the Satrap kind of perks up. He's like, haha, see, now we'll see about this. And Kennit's like, yeah, of course we will. Why would we flee? We're in our own waters. I have all of my serpents surrounding me. Let's give them a show of power. But before we do that, we're going to sign this treaty, this negotiation that we've been working so hard on. So you can't squirm out of anything. So they do sign. So he grins at Sorkor and saying, when they confront us, if they do, we shall see what regard they have for their satrap's word and for his life. I believe we have several Jamalian flags amongst our plunder. As the Lord High Magnadon Satrap of all Jamalia is our guest, it is only fitting that we fly them in his honor. Jola, calm yourself. See that the Satrap's flag is added to our own. Then have the men prepare themselves for battle. Sorkor, Red, I recommend you return to your ships and do likewise. I must consult with my ship and the serpents. Ah yes, our guests. Wintro, make them comfortable and secure in Althea's rooms, will you? She and Jack will join them there until this is over. He did not specifically command that they be locked in. Wintro clutched that omission to himself. He would have a few moments with his sister. So that is where Wintro takes his little freedoms as he can in the omissions of Kennit's words and orders. But that is the negotiation. They have squared away everything. At the end of this, Kennit does not survive, but the Satrap does honor their negotiations.
Yeah.
I don't believe the ransom is ever fully paid because that was not written in anything. But but all of this does come to pass as written out.
Yeah, it is something that does happen, and it's really interesting to see sort of how, even though the Satrap is sort of childish in this moment and he's bored and doesn't want to do this, he does still agree with it, even though he was held at ransom. Like, he could just say, no, I'm not doing that. Also, Kennit's dead. I don't have to.
I think it comes up later, but it's because Kennit jumped overboard to defend him with his life, right? He took the stab. He wanted to defend the Satrap because that was his power at the moment, and the Satrap's nobles are the ones who wanted to kill him.
Right.
So I think that betrayal and everything is like, okay, Kennit actually was kind of honorable, even if he was just a pirate.
Right.
I'll stick it to my nobles by upholding this, I guess.
Right. Who knows? Who knows what goes on in that man's head?
Right.
But
yeah, a little bit. Like, he turns a little bit of a corner.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's promising. I also thought it was really interesting that something that was specified by Kennit in the setup of the room is that there are some smoking herbs that are of good quality that they had plundered or whatever. And it is not mentioned once that they are being smoked. And Satrap doesn't even comment on it. And I think that's pretty big because we know he spent, a month on the ship with Captain Red demanding or smoking herbs, and then finally could have them and doesn't take them. And I think that's really big for him. And
until the end of the book.
I mean, yeah, but I think it's at least promising that he went into this negotiation and was like, I don't want that.
With a clear-headed mind. Yeah.
And maybe he didn't notice them. Maybe, I kind of feel like
they were definitely drinking the whole time. But.
Yeah, true. But
But
I
yeah,
don't know.
there's a little, strides in the Satrap's character here.
Yeah, and I do also want to point out, so for the whole of the negotiation, we are with Wintrow, which is interesting because I feel that choice was deliberate and that it was somebody who didn't have a stake either way. Like he kind
Right.
of it doesn't matter to him what is worked out in these. To him, it's not really anything he has to worry about.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting to have it from his perspective, but also to see how sort of disparaging he is about Kennit's mirth in drawing this out and making
Right.
everybody uncomfortable. Like Kennit's frenzied, he's whatever. It's not the look that he has been giving Kennit more recently. It's more back to his original, like, wow, this dude isn't a nice person.
Right. Like things that he's back to things that Kennit is doing works out for the good of a lot of people, but he himself isn't great.
Yeah. And so I think it's really interesting for that reason also to get this perspective from his point of view, because he has sort of been disillusioned by Kennit and just sort of realizing, no, Kennit was never a good person. He just has good actions, I guess.
Right.
But he himself is not a good person.
And also from Wintrow's point of view, we get to see the interactions between Malta and the Satrap. And we've spent a lot of time in Malta's point of view with the Satrap recently. So
Right.
we can already kind of guess and know what is going on in their heads in
Yes.
this scene, which is, I think, the mark of a well done character
Yeah.
in an author's work. I've talked about this before, but I really like The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, and he does the same things where you build up a character and you see them from a different point of view and you know what they're thinking or how they're going to react to things. And it's really fun to watch characters from a different point of view and what, that point of view character thinks of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it does. I think all these characters, though, especially Hobb, she's so good at writing such whole characters and so in depth. Like they're all so in depth. And especially since we're in their heads, you do really feel like you know them well and how they're reacting. Like, Kenneth's thinking some horrible, heinous things in his mind. And
just laughing with glee, thinking how his luck is with him.
yes. And then, Malta is like so mad at Satrap and just thinking about how he's such a stupid little boy and she has to do everything. And Satrap's just bored. We don't ever get his point of view, but you know enough about him to know he's just bored. He doesn't want to do this anymore.
The one thing I find weird about this section of the chapter is that Wintrow is coming at this like he is a master negotiator himself.
Yeah.
And yes, he was raised as the firstborn son in a trader household, but he went to the monastery when he was like 9 or something. So he wouldn't have had a lot of opportunity to learn about negotiation.
I think it was younger than 9 because, that would mean he was only at the monastery for what, like 5 years, 6 years?
Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like he was there for a lot longer because Malta was really little. They're only like, what, a year apart, right?
Yeah.
And she was like a kid when he left. And I feel like more of a kid than Selden. If that
yeah, possibly.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just making things up.
But either way, it
yeah.
equates to the same thing where he wouldn't have gotten a lot of training in that. And maybe it's just observation of other traders and he's not coming at it from an expert point of view, but more of like she seems in charge of what she is doing and seems to be making logical sense for her argument, not in that is exactly what I would do kind of way. But it doesn't rub me the wrong way. It just seems slightly a different perspective than we have gotten from Wintrow before.
Fair. I would say I somewhat agree with what you're saying. I think it is a weird thing of him being like, oh, she's such a good trader. However, he is very well read. I don't think he's ever seen anybody do trading. Like,
right.
Kyle definitely wasn't having him in on those meetings, and then also I don't think he would have gotten any, like as a child, gotten to see anything. Because also I guess his dad was a captain of a different ship. But
it also seems like in Bingtown, at least in the trader families, a lot of people are raised with those axioms, right? Like present your points logically, come at everything like this, like
maybe
they're all kind of talk in the same way.
Yeah, I'm
They
sure
all bring
it's
up the same kind of.
I'm sure it's little things that you say to your kids to like
Yeah.
simplify.
Mhm.
But also I think because he is really well read and he is educated,
Right.
he could look at it objectively and say, clearly
Yeah.
she knows what she's being very good at arguing for her points and not just giving everything to Kennit right away.
That's where I'm kind of feeling in
Yeah.
my mind too. It's just I understand the need to present things like that
Yeah.
so we can see an outside perspective of how Malta has grown
Mm-hmm.
into the role. It's just doesn't quite make sense for where we have left Wintrow off recently.
Fair.
But yeah, that's the start of the climax of the book. That's kind of the sails are spotted
Yeah,
by both
ships.
parties, and things are going to come to a head pretty soon.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting that I can't believe it's getting to the good stuff already. I feel like it's getting harder and harder just to read the one chapter. I want to keep going and see what happens next, and that usually happens around this point every book. So
yeah, it's a good sign.
Yeah.
We're getting closer and closer. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you have thoughts, please let us know. It is fitzhappy@gmail.com, or you can message us directly at Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, on Blue Sky, and Threads, on Reddit, where it is Fitzhappy, and all of those. Please follow us. Let us know what's going on in your life. Let us know what you're thinking about the books at the time. Whatever you're feeling.
Yeah, we always look forward to and enjoy hearing your thoughts. So please send them in.